Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the San Francisco Roundtable Technical Working Group meeting for November 14, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And joining us today, we are meeting via Zoom. And joining us today are the staff to the Roundtable, Kathleen Wentworth, Roundtable Coordinator, and also Angela Montes, Roundtable Administrative Secretary. And we also have Doreen Stockdale, HMMH Aviation Technical Consultant. Welcome back, Doreen, good to see you.
Thanks.
As well, we have Lisa Awazasa, Deputy Director of Planning and Building Department, County of San Mateo. And I believe Linda is with us, Linda Wallen, Senior Legislative Aide to Supervisor Dave Pine. And from SFO, Bert Ganoung, SFO Aircraft Noise Office Manager. And I will defer to Kathleen or Angela to continue to tell us who else do we have, maybe from our friends in the FAA.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We have Brian Perkins from the Office of Congresswoman Jackie Spear, and no other people other than your committee members, including Ricardo now.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for joining us. With that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to roll call. Kathleen, would you please proceed with the roll call?
Roll call. Chair Hindi.
Here.
Member O'Connell.
Here.
Member Ortiz.
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. For the record, do we have anybody else from the roundtable joining us today?
I see Cecilia Taylor is with us.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Member Taylor.
And that's the only other person I see. Angela, anybody I missed?
Yes, Anne, I'm attempting to transfer Member Ann Schneider over, but she's also with us.
Okay, wonderful. Good to see you, or thank you for joining us, both of you, Member Taylor and Member Schneider. Okay, moving on to next item, public comments. This would be the time for members of the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda. If you would like to speak, place your hand and I will pass it over to Angela to give you more directions.
Thank you, Chairman. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment period, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, you may press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your microphone and inform you that you may begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes. Please note that members of the public must wait for the prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raise hand function. Written comments that were submitted in advance will be noted with the name and city of sender if provided and posted to the Roundtable website. And I do see 2 hands raised for items not on the agenda. So I will put up my timer and I will first call on Jennifer, followed by Remy Tan. Jennifer?
Okay, thank you. Good evening. This is a general comment or perhaps a question about the proposals that are discussed in the technical working group here for the SFO Roundtable, and in general, SFO's proposals that end up in the IFP gateway. I believe it's really important for all of this work that is done to carry a very clear disclaimer that the SFO proposals do not have the unanimous consent of the communities that stand to be affected by any of the changes they are proposing, and to state who is approving or consenting to any of these changes. In July 2021, the FAA stated that they would only accept community proposals that have 100% unanimous consent by the communities that are affected. This was one of the reasons that was given for not moving with the proposal that was presented by the select committee that did not have a unanimous consent. So as I mentioned, it's a comment and also a question. Somebody is giving us cross signals here, whether it's the FAA or SFO, but at any rate, it should be made clear who has been consulted and where consultation has occurred or not occurred before these go to the IFP gateway, and also before any environmental declarations are made per NEPA. So yeah, I would appreciate that, because you're aware of the controversies that exist in the manner that proposals are being handled and processed through what are federal resources, which belong to all of us, not just SFO. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call on Remy Tan.
Hello, this is Remy Tan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Remy Tan. I live in the north part of Pacifica, Pacific Manor, Edgemar, and our neighborhood has been just inundated by aircraft noise, and it's gotten really worse in the past 6 months to a year. Aircraft is flying pretty low over our neighborhood, all hours of the night, 2, 3 a.m. And, I've tracked some of these guys on Flight Radar 24, and they're mainly the Asian liners going over to the Far East. And there's also a lot of freight aircraft that's going across, and those are usually older, like 747s and DC-10s, MD-11s, and they make a lot of noise going over. And I've also noticed, hiked up in the hills in North Pacifica, and noticed like some of the big planes like the A380 take off very low and slow, and they come pretty darn close to the hills. So I always wonder if one of those guys lose an engine, if that plane's not going to make it and actually hit the hill. I've looked at the next gen maps, and it looks like that the planes coming off of 28 right and left should be able to make a right-hand turn, go over the industrial areas of Brisbane, just north of the airport, and then go out over the bay, and then make a left over the gate to go out to the Pacific, or make a right and go over San Pablo Bay, go out, towards Europe and the East Coast. So I don't know why, the planes have to go across, populated neighborhoods very close to the hilltops, and possibly causing a crash situation. And also we get a lot of air pollution that we can smell from the planes, and it's from Serramonte Mall all the way across into North Pacifica. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. And with that, Chairman, we do not have any more hands raised, but I did want to note to Mr. Ganoung and Ms. Wolin that I am attempting to promote you to panelists if you do see that request. But other than that, Chairman, we do not have any more hands raised for items not on the agenda. And I believe you're muted, Sam.
Here we go. Sorry about that. 2 years and we still forget to unmute. Anyway, moving on. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which includes item 1 and item 2. I would like to move on to set the agenda and approve the consent calendar, which includes item 2, resolution adopting finding for remote meetings. Staff will note but not read any written comments and allow members of the public to speak. Ms. Montek, do we have anyone from the public who would like to speak on these 2 items?
Thank you, Chairman. I do not see any virtual hands raised for this item.
Thank you very much. And moving on to members of the roundtable. Anybody would like to pull an item from the consent?
No, I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
And I would second that.
Thank you. We got a motion from member O'Connell and seconded by member Ortiz. Roll call, please.
Chair Hindi,
Yes.
Member O'Connell,
Yes,
Member Ortiz.
Yes,
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, item number 3 on the agenda would be introduction to the voluntary FAA Fly Quiet Program presented by Roundtable Technical Consultant Doreen Stockdale. Doreen, welcome again and good to see you.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen here. All right. All right, I'm here today just to give you a basic overview of Fly Quiet programs, as well as touch on specifics on the San Francisco Fly Quiet program. Fly Quiet programs are used to attempt to improve aircraft noise in the communities around an airport by awarding aircraft operators for compliance with the recommended measures that are established at the airport to reduce noise from aircraft operations and to encourage the use of quieter aircraft. Aircraft operators can voluntarily improve noise by flying quieter aircraft, using quieter techniques to operate their aircraft, and complying with procedures specific to a particular airport. For example, the use of noise abatement departure procedures, the use of noise abatement arrival procedures, and the use of ground-based noise mitigation measures such as engine run-ups and the use of reverse thrust on landing. Fly Quiet programs compare operations of aircraft operators and award those that perform the best and or improve the most during a rating period, which is typically a year. To compare operators, Fly Quiet programs define rating elements important to reduce noise from aircraft operators, determine how to score the aircraft operators on each element of the program, and rank the elements in order of importance and or effectiveness in reducing noise in the communities around the airport. Score the operators on each element and calculate the composite rating for each of those operators. Specific to San Francisco International, their Fly Quiet program consists of 6 rating elements. The fleet noise quality rating evaluates the noise contribution of each airline's fleet as it actually operates at SFO. Airline operators get a higher rating or grade than operators that operate quieter aircraft compared to those who do not. The noise exceedance rating calculates whenever an aircraft overflight produces a noise level higher than the maximum allowable decibel value established for each particular monitoring site around the airport. The Nighttime Preferential Runway Use Program is a noise abatement measure that was developed in 1988 and aims to maximize flights over water and minimize flights over land and populated areas between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. The program is voluntary and compliance is at the discretion of the pilot and command. The item in the Fly Quiet program looks at the aircraft operator's compliance with the use of the measure. The shoreline departure quality rating is measured by the Fly Quiet grading system when aircraft departing runways 28 left and right turn the aircraft to the northeast shortly after takeoff in an attempt to keep aircraft noise away from residential communities located northwest of the airport. The gap departure quality rating scores aircraft that are using gap departure over South San Francisco, San Bruno, Daly City, and Pacifica. The scores are assigned at specific points or gates on the departure set approximately 1 mile apart, with the aircraft at higher altitudes receiving higher scores. And the Foster City arrival quality rating is the latest element added to the Fly Quiet program. And to further reduce the nighttime aircraft noise in neighboring communities, this rating is designed to maximize over bay approaches to runways 28 left and right between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Aircraft arriving to runways 28 left and right during these hours are assessed based on which approach flight path was used, either over the water or over the community. Over the bay approaches are rated good versus over the community, which are rated poorly. In regards to the Fly Quiet program, the role of the San Francisco Roundtable is to concur with the program's elements, support the recognition of the aircraft operators that are leading the way in making the reduction of aircraft noise a priority, monitor constituents to make sure that the Fly Quiet program design meets their needs, and request potential changes and updates of the program if they feel that there are elements that are not being meted by the community. And I know that Kathleen has a lot to discuss on GBAS, so I kept that as concise and as quiet as, or as quick as I could. But if there is any questions or discussion, let me know.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stockdale. With that, let me go ahead to roundtable members if they have any questions or comments on this item.
I do not have any questions or comments.
Thank you very much.
Nope.
I do see Member Schneider have her hand up. Member Schneider.
Thank you. That was really quick, and I appreciate seeing the criteria. And I appreciate Ms. Stockdale's comments that a couple of them were like not to do run-ups and things like that. But I'm going to be really honest. Not one of those metrics really addresses the noise that hits Millbrae. And I can't speak for Burlingame, but for those of us who live uphill of the runways, or even prime time on which is in Burlingame on Rollins Road, none of those are impacted. And for every 28 departure that might make that right turn, I think with the creation of the hotel, that noise is actually captured by that curve of the hotel and directed immediately straight back in an angle in a straight line to Millbrae City Hall, up into my neighborhood and up towards Hillsborough. So I think we probably need to readdress if any of these criteria fit. Even doing run-ups, or they're done at night as opposed to being done during the day. There's some work we need to do there. And if you could address, if any of those at all, try to take into the account of something that Gene Reindel said at our planning meeting for the next ground-based noise meeting, that SFO is actually unique in the United States in that most airports, runways are bidirectional. So they capture the low frequency noise within their contours. But because FAA and SFO ignore the 17% of flights that take off over or arrive over us, that noise, which would include the low frequency noise, is also ignored. And then the meeting prior to that, where they said, wow, we actually go on to alternate flow at SFO if Oakland goes on to alternate flow. Those are two brand new things I've learned after almost 7 years on the roundtable. And we need to hear if there's anything else out there so that we can start measuring for it and seeing if there's any way we can fix it. Because I will tell you, those run-ups that happen at 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock, it lasts for 30, in one case about 44 minutes, those are not quiet. And those are rattling homes all over Millbrae.
Yes, they are.
So every time we used to give out the awards, especially before COVID, yay for the airlines for going to stage 5, but it doesn't mean a damn thing to my community. Thank you.
Understandable. Yep. Thank you, Ann.
Okay. Thank you, Member Schneider. I don't see anybody else. Let me ask a question, Doreen. My understanding that this Fly Quiet program is voluntary.
That's correct.
It is correct. Okay, so I'm just going to take this opportunity and thank those airlines who are being cognizant and doing everything that they can and participating in the program and reducing the noise. As you know, it is something that we continue to seek more relief of aircraft noise, but I want to recognize the airlines that are participating and the one who are really putting an effort to reduce the noise. And notwithstanding Member Schneider's comments, obviously those are important comments and something perhaps SFO could take a look at and figure out how we could incorporate that somehow, some way into the Fly Quiet program, if that is feasible. Okay, anybody else from the roundtable membership has any questions or comments? Kathleen, do you have any comments or questions, or anything on this item?
No, I think Dorian captured all of the basic ones. And I think what's important to understand today as we take the next item, the GBAS discussion, that GBAS concepts that we're going to be talking about, or all GBAS are for arrival aircraft. That is the design of the GBAS program. And I think it's important for us to recognize that we will also be having other options to take a look at departure issues and ground-based noise issues that are not approach issues. So that's what the Fly Quiet program, albeit it is voluntary, is an option and something we need to take a look at on a more expanded level as we go forward in the early part of next year for departure and ground-based noise issues.
Great, thank you, Ms. Wentworth. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to public comment, see if any members of the public have any questions on item number 3.
Thank you, Chairman. I do see one hand, 3 hands raised. So I will call on Remy Tan, followed by Jennifer. Mr. Tan?
Hello, again, Remy Tan with over at Pacific Manor. Just had a question on this. I see that there's a departure that it's called shoreline departure, and I'm not sure why all airlines aren't required to do that shoreline departure instead of taking off, straight out, going out of 28 left and right. And so that's one question. And the second question is wondering why, if there's any incentives, financial incentives for the airlines to use the, departures over the bay instead of over the neighborhoods. Because I've heard that the airlines complain that it costs more money or more fuel to do the bay departures. So if they're incentivized by reduced landing fees, reduced airport fees, that certainly go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela, I'm sorry, but let me take this. Does anyone has any feedback or response to Mr. Tam there?
If you'd like me to address it, I could.
If you would, please,
Certainly.
if you have the answer, sure. If not, we'll get back with them.
Mr. Tam, with regard to the shoreline departure, I should first be clear that that's the name we all knew that departure under for many, many years, but now it's been renamed under Next Gen, but we know what you're talking about. And that's a departure that is not right for every airplane under every circumstance. And we could not mandate that to be used in all cases by any means. It's a safety issue. But we do encourage it when the circumstances are correct for the pilot and the passengers. As far as incentives, there is federal legislation that has been in existence since the early 1990s that highly restricts what can and cannot be offered to airlines to reduce their noise footprint. And that's why why the FAA established, well, it's not why, but it's a factor, I think, in the Fly Quiet program, because that is a voluntary program. But financial incentives, as I understand it, aren't just not available for incentivizing what you think because of federal legislation. It's not that San Francisco wouldn't want to, but San Francisco airport staff may be able to answer that with more specificity. But it's a federal regulation standing in the way.
Correct, and also grant assurances. Go ahead.
Right.
Bert.
That's where I was headed next. This is Bert Ganoung with San Francisco Airport Noise Office. So as far as the incentives, most of them are very low grade. It would be typically for airlines operating new routes, things like that, where they might get a break in their landing fees. Has to be open to all airlines have to be able to participate in it. Can't be exclusive. Airlines only operating late at night, block it out too. One nice thing about our incentive program is for any airline operating a new route, the airport director did terminate those at night, which is helpful to ensure that less would be adding flights during the critical hours.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Ms. Montes, would you please move on to the next public speaker?
Yes, I'm going to call on Jennifer, followed by, one second, by Mary Jo Fremont. Jennifer?
Hi, thank you. I'm just going to make some, I don't have the criteria in front of me anymore, but much of it does not apply to all of SFO's neighbors that are affected. So for a variety of reasons. And one of the, I'm troubled by this because in a way it's free advertising for airlines, and or sometimes it's false advertising, because to say that the airlines are making every effort to go over water, that they make all of these efforts, but if it doesn't apply to everybody equitably, then it doesn't sound, it doesn't seem right. I think that for any regular product on the market, that would probably not be allowed. And so there aren't enough explanations about that, and there aren't any disclaimers. In terms of money, the airlines, or I should say in general, the aviation industry gets a lot of money in research based on, for example, fleet mix and all of this. And in a symposium I attended, the people who did the research, somebody said there's no quantum leap to be had from reducing the noise on aircraft themselves. So what we need are much more creative and better solutions to addressing traffic at night, for example. There's no distinction, for example, between flying quiet in the, during the day or at night that I can see. But one airplane will start, in Monterey, and within 3 minutes affect Santa Cruz County, Santa Clara, all the way to the airport. So this is not to take away the credit of how much good it's doing communities near the airport, but it is not serving all of SFO's neighbors who are especially affected, for example, by arrivals. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call on Mary Jo Fremont.
Okay, can we go?
Yeah, I'll just listen to this and then I'll turn it down.
Ms. Fremont? I see that your mic is unmuted, but we are not getting any audio from you.
Okay, let me move on. I see Member O'Connell has her hand up, and then we'll try Ms. Fremont after.
I just wanted to make a comment to Mr. Tan's comment about flying more of the routes over Brisbane and our industrial park, and in connection with the shoreline departure. Those planes, depending on which runway they are taking off from, do fly loud and very low over Brisbane, and having it being so much closer to the airport, they are quite a bit louder. So one of the reasonings behind one of the goals is to not be shifting noise in this roundtable or encouraging noise shifting. And the shoreline departure is not necessarily a good departure for Brisbane in many instances. And so we have a responsibility to that community to not be shifting noise there. So it's just more of a matter of point and not really anything that has a good answer, but I just wanted to throw that out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Member O'Connell. Ms. Montes, is Mary Jo Fremont with us?
Yes, she's still on the line, and I'm attempting to unmute her mic again.
Did it work?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about this. So first, the name of the Fly Quiet program is a great name. And I think we all agree here, and including Ann Schneider and others, that the metrics or what is used today really does not really reflect what everybody wants, which is fly quiet. Right now, there is the current metrics have a strong bias on departure. with, some particular gates and some quieter engines and so on. But on the arrivals, it doesn't do anything, for instance, for Menlo Park or East Palo Alto. Forget about everybody else who is not on the roundtable. And we, for instance, speed brakes, we know the airlines and the particular flight that are really noisy. We know them, we have identified them. And these airlines sometimes, in fact, based on the measures, the current metrics used in the Fly Quiet programs are being recognized as flying quiet. That's not true. So I think looking again at the metrics and what needs to be done, given that we have the data, and especially with ANIM, when we'll have these noise reports and we'll be able to identify the particular flight, etc., you'll have much more data and much richer to be really able to see who is seriously flying quieter than other things. So I would encourage you to use more the data that are going to come from the noise reports, as opposed to using what has been in place for a long time, which is okay at a certain point, but that needs to be reevaluated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fremont. And Chairman, with that, we do not have any more virtual hands raised from members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ms. Stockdale, for your presentation. And thank you everyone who participated in this discussion. Moving on to item number 4, roundtable suggestion for GBAS 2A innovative procedure. As you know, the SFO GBAS team continues to work towards future innovative ideas for routing arriving planes in a quieter manner. Today, we will discuss a group of 10 suggestions for the technical working group to consider recommending to the roundtable for submission to the SFO GBAS team as possible future, and let me underline possible, future GBAS innovative procedures. All of these suggestions are arrivals to SFO since GBAS is designed only for arrival. Some of these suggestions are moderate, but more likely to be doable. Some of these suggestions are more ambitious, but still within reach. These suggestions are not presented as fully vetted or analyzed flight procedure. It is the GBAS team who has repeatedly told us that they want concepts, ideas, suggestions that they can adapt, modify, and transform into their workable GBAS flight procedure. Our role today is not to determine if these suggestions are technically feasible. It is up to the SFO GBAS team to decide to design a procedure based on any of these 10 suggestions, or any suggestion from anyone for that matter. Any GBAS procedure finally proposed will be subject to all applicable FAA regulations and processes, as well as SFO processes, including presentation to the SFO roundtable for its review. Before moving forward, this item going to be presented by Ms. Wentworth, who spent a considerable amount of time. Thank you, Kathleen, for working on this. And as Kathleen presents, I will pause after each suggestion and get members to get involved and ask questions or make comments on that. Kathleen, let's go ahead and hand it over to you. And you got the mic.
Okay, I'd like to share screen here if we can. Make this work. Did the technology work? Not fully.
It does.
I got one screen. Anyone see 2 screens? No. Let me try that. Give me a second here. And let's try this. 2 screens, everybody? Yes?
Yes.
All right, we have it. Okay. Just in terms of general introduction, as we all know and have heard here time and again, we have in our San Francisco Bay Area a crowded airspace. We in San Francisco here share with Oakland as well as San Jose. Oakland's over here and San Jose down below us. Sorry about that. What I wanted to briefly do before we go into the suggestions themselves is to give us a little bit of a refreshing on the actual kinds of procedures that we're talking about. So in San Francisco, our procedures are based on aircraft who are coming in from the north and coming down this way towards, coming down this way towards San Francisco. airplanes that are coming from the ocean, coming this way. Airplanes that are coming from the south, this way. Those three directions generally, typically, but not always, will land on 2-8 left. We also have arrivals coming in from, let's call it the East Coast, as well as this offshoot from the airplanes from the north that come down the bay. And those two generally, but not always, will land on 2-8 right. So those are the ideas, those are the approaches that we're going to take a look at and see what we can do to make some changes. Now, it is a busy airspace. The odds of us being able to develop too many new, fancy, brand new procedures is not a great option, not a likely option. So we focus today on some suggestions that are somewhat incremental and modest in nature, because those are some changes that might just be doable. We also focus on changes that can be implemented in the nighttime. And that's because during the nighttime, as we all know, although it's noisy, there are fewer airplanes in the sky, which gives us a little bit more wiggle room to get some procedures and aircraft to be able to do new flight kind of paths over at nighttime. So with that in mind, I want to take a look at our first procedure. This is page 8 of your packets, but I'll have it up here on the screen as well. And this one is the down the bay, which we just talked about over here. If I go down here, I'll just put this one up to keep an eye on it. This is this procedure down here. It's going like that down the bay. And the GBAS team has already designed a check the red line down the bay procedure. And that's great as far as it goes. But we have a suggestion that we could add, slightly modify this. So we do the down the bay, just like this recommend, like just they have recommended. But instead of turning along the red line, which takes us somewhat close to Woodward Shores, Foster City, East San Mateo, we have them go and follow a different line, a green line that keeps them away from those cities and then get themselves to the airport. So that's the sum of it. Instead of the red line, fly the green line. Red is bad, green is good. Is this feasible? We don't know. It's a suggestion. I'm going to keep it simple with that and take questions from the members.
Thanks, Kathleen. Just to reiterate for anyone who is listening and anyone who is participating, again, these are really a mere suggestion that could be feasible, could not be feasible. We simply submitting those to the GBAS team for them to work on them and then get back with us and hopefully for further discussion. But the purpose tonight, this afternoon, is to really get the members to decide if this is something we want to recommend to the membership of the roundtable. With that, I'm going to go ahead and open the questions for this first one, the down the bay procedure that Kathleen has just talked about. Let me get to my participant screen. I see Member O'Connell and then Member Ortiz.
Thank you so much. Do you think, Kathleen, that the planes making the tighter turn to stay on the green track lane are going to need to use more speed brakes, or by tilting the aircraft, does that make it noisier on what is heard on the ground? Or do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, I'm not an aeronautical engineer. I would think that it would be minimal, if any, because we're coupling that with keeping these airplanes on the green line, much further away from the city. So
I'm meaning more at the initial hard turn they're going to be making.
Like over here?
Right, in the smaller loop. If making that turn, I don't know if the change of an airplane makes any more noise, but that's something we may want to ask.
That's possible. I don't think it would be noticeable. And as you can see here, the turn goes over I'm going to say that's Bay Wetlands over in East Bay.
Okay.
And so I think the path itself has been in existence, and that's why following the path is such a good thing, because it's already been there for a while. Even before GBAS designed the red lines, this has been a procedure that has been in existence for 20 years or more on an informal basis. And air traffic control allowed airplanes to go fly essentially this procedure on their own. And if you were familiar with the area, you could take advantage of that procedure. But now GBAS is going to make this hopefully a procedure, and just making this turn a little bit tighter and bringing them in. I doubt very much it would cause anything other than the smallest amounts of difference in noise levels, except for the fact that they are farther from land. And so that will obviously make a difference.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. That's a very good question. Moving on to Member Ortiz, followed by Member Schneider.
Mr. Ortiz, you're muted.
Okay, so I have to start over.
I'm afraid so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was a little bit's been partially answered already, but I'm going to run it again. So the red line in your graphic is the proposed procedure. The green line is something that's actually being used today informally, is what I heard you say?
I probably confused you on that one. The red line is actually the GBAS proposed down the bay that we've heard at previous meetings. So the red line is the proposed down the bay, and that largely mimics what has been there for some time. So,
I'm sorry. Okay, so that I'm glad you said that. So
yeah,
what's being flown today informally matches more the red line than the green line?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we would be asking them to do things a little different than what they're flying today.
Correct. We'd be asking them to turn a little bit tighter and stay farther from land until they get past the
Very
bridge,
good. Okay,
basically.
that was a clarification I needed. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. Member Schneider.
Thank you, Chair. You know, a data point, there's a couple of data points that the close-in communities are never given, and that is the number of flights that come in and miss their landing and have to go around again. I would love to see that in all future noise reports. I know it might explain why sometimes there's an airplane directly over my house where it should never be. But I'm looking at this, and if we are having airlines all over the world coming in, maybe not all over the world, depending on their home base, but we're asking them to make a tighter turn, and this will save Foster City. My reading of this, Foster City should see improvement for this. But how many more, and what are those called? They're I want to call them overflights, but I don't think that's the right term. And then my second thing, and I would like this in the minutes, to me, GBAS has a plus and a minus, at least for the close-in communities, at least for mine. The plus is that at night, flights might get in more quickly, and as long as they have space at a gate, they can unload and reload and take off before the magic 10 p.m. time. The flip side of that is that the airport will be able to handle more flights per day. Therefore, irregardless of the known, well, it's not really a noise moving, it's just simply going to add more noise. So on one thing, it might help us at night, although I really don't believe that, because I believe more flights will simply be coming in. So I'd like an answer for both, and I'd like this data to be measured on both. On that, I really think the airport deserves to let the close-in communities know how many airplanes and airlines are messing up on their approach to San Francisco.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Schneider. To answer your first question, we generally call that procedure or go around or missed approach, but generally it's called a go around.
Thank you.
And it's almost always done for safety reasons. It's always done for safety reasons. So
safety for the people in the airplane, not necessarily for the people living underneath or nearby. gonna start pushing this more. We are
Okay.
asking with the noise, so.
And I'm sorry, and your second had to do with the,
Well, my second is first, I just simply want to know how many of these are happening, the go-arounds, which I think will affect a number of communities. But the other one was once GBAS is in and the airlines are used to it and the pilots are used to it, how many more airplanes, how many more flights will SFO be adding to their overall? Maybe it'll be quieter for San Francisco, but it may not be quieter for many of us. It may be additional noise. And we need to start telling the truth in terms of one problem does not just fix or it may fix one thing, but it may hurt in another place. And what I have found in my 7 years now is that we fix, and this is across any problem that a city council member works on, we might fix one thing, manage lanes, rubberized asphalt, but all that water from managed lane is draining into Millbrae, and I just saw the pipes this weekend. And that problem of flooding could have been handled if we're looking at all problems in a more inclusive look of all of the problems. That's still not the right word, but you're going to hear me saying this a lot in the future.
Member Schneider, thank you for your comment, but I would like to keep us focused on what we are discussing today. You're kind of discussing overall.
Yeah, but we keep talking about no noise shifting, and GBAS to me is going to be adding buku noise to Millbrae.
I hear you, and I understand what you're saying, but this is not the discussion before us today. We're talking
and I'll
about
respectfully disagree and shut up, Chair. Foster City will be helped, Millbrae will be hurt. It is the San Mateo County way.
Just to be clear, no one wants you to be quiet. I'm just kind of trying to focus the conversation for the item before us. But thank you for your input. I really appreciate it. Ms. Wentworth, anything else you would like to add on this?
if there are no further member questions, I'll go on to the next slide.
Okay, just let me make a note very quickly for members of the public. I will open the opportunity for members of the public to comment on item number 4, or ask question on item number 4, once Ms. Wentworth is done to all the suggestions. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Before we go to the next slide, to introduce it, I want to go back to this general view of the Bay Area airways. And the next 3 slides are really just variations on one slide. And the variation is recommended or suggested to be applicable to the surfer. Oops, let's get a little, excuse me, move this out of the way so I can see here. So the next 3 slides will be applicable to the surfer, the pirate, and the Bodega West. And those 3 arrivals are the same recommendation will apply to all 3 of those. So just to be clear, it's the next 3 is more kind of daunting than it really is. With that in mind, let's go to number 2, and this is 2A. Again, this one, whoops, left over from earlier, sorry. Okay, well, it's not going to be cooperative. Okay, so 2A, we'll start with the bodega, and that's the one that's coming down from the north down this way. And you see that replicated here, coming down this way. Now, the bodega approach, as well as the pirate approach, this one, are largely vector driven by air traffic control after a certain point. So their exact turn point will vary with conditions for that day and traffic that goes on. And that's true to some extent for surfer, or about half of the surfer flights are also vectored, but half of the surfer flights or so are on track. But let's just start with the bodega. So this bodega generally will come down and come around and tightly into the Bay communities, go straight in on 28 left as a general rule. Not always, but as a general rule. So during those times of the night, and possibly during slow times on the day as well, depending on what is capable, we're suggesting by this procedure is that that everything happened just the same as it always does till it comes out to about there. And at that point, they're going to be turned around to come in on 28 left, close to the Bay cities. And instead of that, we are recommending with this suggestion that instead of going this way, we go this way. Excuse me. And get that way. So in other words, don't go down the 28 left path, just go a little bit further out, just a little bit, and pick this nice offset path to 28 right. Nothing changes here. Nothing changes here. All that stays the same. Whatever the controller is going to do, he or she is going to do. So none of that changes. The only thing we're suggesting change is that after they have gotten the airplane pretty close to the shoreline here and well past all residences, nothing changes over houses, then you swing them just a little bit wide and get them on a path that's a little bit further away. If I can just continue to 2B, we'll see that same kind of concept. Oh, once again, I'm sorry, I didn't clean up from last time. And this one has to do with the surfer, which is this one down here. And so it comes up and nothing changes on the surfer. All of this stays just the same as it is today. But in the suggestion, once the aircraft is past all the houses, you have a new path that swings a little bit wide and comes around. That's a heck of a flight. Nothing, same idea as the one we just had. And likewise for 2C, similar. This is the pirate. This is the one that comes here. And this is the one that comes from the ocean. And once they get past about Woodside here, they are on a heading. It's not a strict path. It's on a heading. Sometimes the heading will go here. Sometimes it'll go here. Sometimes it'll go here. It doesn't matter where it goes. But wherever the path takes it, that it should be turning left for 28 left, we're suggesting that the airplane be allowed to go over to 28 right for that path. I know that was kind of a lot fast, but basically, let's see if I can go back. Basically, here's today's path. And this is largely vector driven by air traffic controllers. And sometimes they will do a tight turn over there, sometimes to intercept, and sometimes it depends. However, we're just saying, instead of turning them tight onto 28 left, just make them come over here to 28 right and do that same thing. Ooh, sorry. Okay, so that's,
Thank you.
that's
Thank you,
three
Kathleen.
different arrivals with one. Don't turn on 28 left, go and turn on 28 right. Bottom line. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. On the pirate, does that usually kind of like in the early morning hours, or is that used also throughout the day?
It is used throughout the day. It's used primarily for oceanic arrivals. And sometimes it can be not generally the middle of the night, but we get some at 4 o'clock in the morning, between 4 and 5. And I'm trying to think if we could get, and we get some, I think Oakland Oceanics, but that's Oakland. But we do get them 24/7.
Got it. No, we definitely, I mean, here in Ponce City, we definitely hear them early in the morning, like 4 or 5. And
Yeah,
they're pretty loud when they come in.
very, very much so. And it's a difficult challenge. And I think that's also something that the roundtable may want to address it and other collateral ways to address those 4 to 5 a.m. flights.
Do you know why you said a heading and then they branch off rather than go to a waypoint over the water and then make the left?
That's a really good question. And I'm not an air traffic controller, so I can only repeat what I've heard from other people. But as a rule, number one, you down on my right-hand screen, we've got surfer coming up this way. And surfer is sort of like a conveyor belt, and they're just going to keep coming. These are from Los Angeles and Southern California and areas that come up that way. And so they're relentlessly coming up, wanting to come in here. Bodega is coming down this way, and they've got to merge with surfer. And then the less frequent pirate arrivals come in here. And I think, and they do have a waypoint, and it is right somewhere. Let's see. I can't really see. It's Woodside, basically. If you could find Woodside on the map, but it's going to be somewhere, around here. And so the airplanes come in this way, and they have to fit in between the bodegas and the surfers. And so the air traffic controller makes a lot of judgment calls and does his or her best to merge these where he or she can. And so that's why sometimes we'll get an arrival that'll be turned much further to the north versus midpoint versus sort to that way. And I think it's just they're doing the best they can to fit them in at that point. And they don't really have a waypoint past the Woodside called ARG waypoint.
Understood. Thank you for that explanation. Okay, Member O'Connell.
Thank you. In theory, these suggestions to use 2.8 right would push some of the noise a little further out over water, and I think that's great. Under what capacity can they use just the right runway? Because a lot of times I'll be driving down 101 and I see two planes coming in seemingly parallel to use both 2.8 left and 2.8 right almost at simultaneous times.
Right.
I know that it isn't, but
Seems that way.
it seems that way.
Yeah,
And I know
really.
one's going slower and one's not going as fast so that they can stagger it. But how much of the traffic load could be on 2.8 right comparative to using both runways? Are these in off hours that you'd ask that, or in lighter usage?
Absolutely right. This is designed, this suggestion would be most appropriate for nighttime when, make up a number after midnight, after 1 a.m. I think we'd have to just see what it would come up to. But there's also, or at least at one time, there were some hours during the day where there were not so many airplanes that would be in the way for this kind of a thing. Bert could probably give us actual numbers on those. But yes, it's going to be limited in the hours to answer your question. And at this point, since it's just a suggestion, I don't know that we can quantify that because we don't know. And it may be that you would only be able to do this in an hour, a portion of an hour. In other words, we want the air traffic controllers to start thinking about, hey, can I bring this person over a little bit further to get them onto the right-hand runway because there's nobody here, whatever the conditions are. And so it would be an option just that would be available.
And maybe Bert would know this, and maybe it's not a question for you, but it's my understanding that they can only use the two parallel runways virtually at the same time when it is, visibility of a certain amount.
Correct.
And so if they're using instrumentation, or if it's a foggy day, or there's, whatever, then they can't use the two runways simultaneously. In theory, they've got to stagger it more as
Correct.
if they were coming in on one runway. And I would think that with the amount of days that, excuse me, we tend to get fog or limited visibilities, they're almost doing that, one runway at a time, as it is now. So maybe it could be utilized even more than we think could be possible.
Possibly.
Thank you, Terry. Ricardo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Kathleen, I just remember this coming up in the past as far as moving that approach a little further into the bay. Do you remember what the objection was? And is there some change that that's no longer an objection?
I don't remember that specific. Are you talking about moving there? This just for
Well,
verification,
let
just
me-
so I can explain, this green line already exists. That it's part of a different procedure that goes over the water, but it does
Okay,
exist.
and I'm sorry, so that's a good point. How often is that one used?
This particular one is an RNAV procedure. And I would say it's not typically used very much, but there's another procedure called the FMS Bridge Visual, which is not too different than this one. It does the same concept. And that one is used considerably by these diamond arrivals. These
I just have in my mind that at some point we asked the question as to moving that final approach more towards into the bay, and there was, I'm trying to think of what it was that there were, anyway. But I see your point. So
I don't know.
maybe, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
No, I don't. I'm sorry. I don't remember that very thing. But I think it's just incumbent on us to just kind of give it a try and see what the GBAS people say. The FAA says it's a long path from here to there.
200% in favor of it.
Are there more
Thank you.
questions,
Thank you,
Mr. Chair?
No question. I'm just going to a very quick comment. Just a reminder for all of us that the reason we are dealing with arrival, because GBAS, as I mentioned in the opening comments, GBAS is dealing with arrivals. It's not dealing with departures. So we could go ahead, Kathleen, move on to the next one.
Okay. So, so if you got that concept, the next one, 3A, B, and C, build on 2A, B, and C. So it's fairly simple. What the next iteration of this is, these 3A, B, and C, is not only to just bypass 2A left path to go on to a typical 2A right path, but to take it a little bit further. And let's see if we can go down to the next. So starting with the bodega arrival, we're saying, okay, normally the bodega arrival would turn tight in here past those communities. And we talked about asking them to take it out a little bit. That would keep it away from those communities. And in 2A, B, and C. Now in 3A, B, and C, we're saying, okay, if it's the dead of the night and there's really nobody around and not much going on, can we take this a step further? Instead of just taking it not here, but can we take this quite a bit further? And you say, well, that's nice. I guess it kind of is a further distance from these cities. And of course it does. But the real reason that this would be an intriguing idea is that airplane altitude and their need to lose altitude to get to the runway end is based on a lot of factors, one of which is the amount of distance to travel. If you need to lose 500 feet, you might not be able to do it on this red line here, but you might be able to do it on this new green line. And that means that maybe instead of crossing here at, I don't know, 4,500 feet, maybe you could cross it at 500 feet, 5,000 feet, excuse me. So that the ability to have more distance in which to lose altitude may allow you to have higher altitudes earlier in the flight. And as we know, higher altitudes generally result in a lessening of noise. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be quiet or, humongously different, but it's an opportunity to see if GBAS can do some of the things they're talking about, which is to alter some of the, get some of the altitudes en route on the way to this to be a little bit higher. So that's the concept here. So this is, I'm going to call this a wide path. And maybe, I don't know what they can do. Maybe if it's the middle of the night, San Jose doesn't have a lot of traffic at night, you might be able to go down and come up with something that would be really clever and creative. I don't know what GBAS is capable of, but whatever they are, the wider the path, the longer the path that the airplane takes, the more time they have to lose altitude, which could result in higher altitudes back here. And I will just briefly do the same thing. Oops, I already played with this one.
Okay, thanks. I see Member Schneider with her hand up.
Can I just?
I'm sorry,
can I
Kathleen,
just
I'm
run-
sorry. I apologize. I thought you did. Oh, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to kind of just show how it would work. Basically, here's the surfer coming up from the south, and there would be no change to the surfer path while it's over houses. And once it's clear of the houses, then they could take it into a very wide path if they chose to. Same thing with the pirate arrival, and we got the same idea. Everybody's kind of got it. You got it pretty much. It'll go like this. And okay, so that's 3 A, B, and C arrivals that go wide to wind up landing at 28 right, but with the potential for perhaps being able to have some higher altitudes earlier in the segment. Okay.
Thanks, Kathleen. Sorry for interrupting.
No.
Member Schneider, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kathleen. Could you go back to your previous slide? And I know right now we are only looking at those little curves about how to allow a plane to hopefully coax more into the airport. No, previous one. The one that showed arrivals coming in from Daly City over Northern Pacifica, directly over Millbrae. That one right there. Can we add to a future discussion of why we even have that? Why is that red line where it's hitting Daly City? Why isn't it a little bit farther out at the ocean and then over
I
the
see.
watershed?
I'm sorry. I'm with you now. This area.
Well, no, that area, but also as it comes down towards Dumbarton Bridge, I'm guessing that's Woodside. Why isn't all of that over the watershed?
I can't give you a definitive answer, but I can also tell you that there's another path. And I'm sorry, I don't have the best tools. Another path that comes like this that goes to San Jose. So there is a conflict there. But more than that, I can't explain. And that's probably beyond our discussion for today. But
for the future, I'd like this to come back because all these paths come over on top of Millbrae, and each one is an additional increment to everything else. And I know you were sort of surprised when I said it is as noisy at my house at night as it is at Tanforan on a gap departure. So we need to be looking at cumulative impacts on that. So for a future roundtable or a future working group.
Okay.
It's not really a ground-based noise issue. It's really a working group or full roundtable. And it shouldn't, enough with all these flights over populated areas, period.
Noted. Thank you. Member Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. And I agree with Member Snyder. My question is it possible to have GBAS suggestions that provide benefits to more cities that are overflown on the peninsula?
Absolutely. I think the GBAS team had solicited or is soliciting suggestion from any community and any members of the community, no matter where it geographically are. But it just, I think as members of the public has mentioned, Jennifer, I think was talking about this a couple of times today. The roundtable basically is advocating for its membership, but the rest of the community, no matter where they are, that is something that they could definitely suggest. And here in the roundtable, I had made it to be open that we could allow members of the public, even though they are not member of the roundtable, to put their suggestions, and I'm encouraging that actually. And the SFO GBAS team has expressed their welcoming to receiving suggestion from anyone, anywhere.
Thank you. Through the chair, just have a quick question. Is it possible for Kathleen to make suggestions for other cities?
Ms. Taylor, you mean to make suggestions that would benefit a different city?
Yes, please.
If you bear with me, the next slide will do just that.
Okay, thank you.
But then I'm happy to answer your question later on as well. So
Okay.
I think that's pretty much covers it. And I know we're running short on time. I'll try to be more concise going forward.
Okay, go ahead, Kathleen. the
Any other
next one.
questions? No more questions? Okay. So with that, we will take this slide and move it out of the way because this has to do with west flow arrivals. These are the arrivals that we're using 85 to 90% of the time in San Francisco. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes if we can orient it, here's our San Francisco airport map again. And what I'm going to be talking about now very quickly, because I know I need two monitors. I can't do this. What we're talking about now is a different approach, what we get on our rainy days. We all know that the patterns change then. And on those rainy days, we have airplanes coming up from the south, airplanes coming down as well. Sorry. Let's just stay with this. Coming up from the south and coming around this way. I can't go quite as far as I should. I'm just again, I'm sorry. Let's just make it quick here. They go up and around and they come in and they land here on runway 19. General concept, okay? Squiggly line and all, that's the idea of it, is that during the rainy days, we've got airplanes coming down from the north, coming to do this. And we have them coming up from the south and they all kind of join at some point. So the problem is they're coming up this way over the coast and down over the city of San Francisco. So with that in mind, let me go to number 4, the suggestion. And this is, I want a picture of recent flight patterns on September 22nd from one of the flight reporting places. And the red lines are the actual flight tracks. So you have tracks coming up from there, coming down here and coming around this way and coming around this way. And so the suggestion here is that instead of doing it that way, that you take the airplanes that normally would be coming up the coast and bring them up off the ocean and bring them through the Golden Gate and down that way. So we would do the same kind of thing, but these up here, bring them down and bring them over this way where they can connect just like that. Now, there's also a little circle I drew out here, which is supposed to represent a holding pattern. And in times of the future, we're going to be looking at FAA being able to manage their traffic so that not so many airplanes arrive in the same place wanting to land at the same time. And so they'll do whatever they're going to do to keep them on the ground, slow them down. And so at some point in the future, we could anticipate, I think, the ability to bring airplanes in here, maybe put them in the holding pattern once or even twice, and then bring them in. And this would allow a reduction to the coast side, San Francisco, and whether or not they need the holding pattern, that's up for GBAS to talk about, but it's just a concept we have. This is, for those of you familiar, this is probably not very far from GOBS. I'm thinking GOBS is probably around there. It's pretty close though. And this would be used only, it could be used 24/7 during the period when we have the rainy weather and the winds out of the south and the runways are landing on runway 19, not 28. So it's a simple thing, keeping it over the water, giving it a path to come around and to join, and then to join the approach from there. Holding pattern as needed. Simple, but something we haven't. Questions?
I don't see any questions. No one has their hands raised. So if no one has any questions, final call. move on to the next one.
Okay, now this is a little tricky. So we're going to go back to the west flow again. Sorry to do this to you, but I tried to put these in descending difficulty. So the surfer arrival down here is 24/7. And so that means that there's noise being created by the surfer day and night. So this is one of those aspirational suggestions, but we're going to run it through and I'll try to be quick. What I'm suggesting in this one is that instead of using the surfer arrival at night, we use something different, an arrival that leaves Los Angeles. This is a sample. This is not the written one. This is just an idea. A sample that flies up this purple line, which kind of goes through the I-5 corridor a bit, and then comes up to be near the Bay Area. This picture over this will show better at the top. That purple line continues up to a point. And now we've got this airplane, and this, I should say, this purple line is a line that's a routing that's done for airplanes going to Oakland, Los Angeles to Oakland. They fly this all the time, this purple line. Only they continue to come over here. They fly this purple line and they keep flying it up until they get where they need to get over to Oakland. I'm suggesting let's use part of this purple line to take these airplanes at night, just at night, instead of on the surfer, causing a great deal of noise to the area. Fly them a route that's already in existence that goes to Oakland. And at a certain point, pick a point, I picked one, we need to get them to connect to the blue line. The blue line already exists in San Francisco. This is the line we've been looking at for the ones that go over here and then jog off to land. So it's a concept of use an existing en route flight route, create a new connector line, if you will, and then connect to an existing blue line, existing blue, existing purple. It's not as easy as it seems to just kind of connect things in the sky. And I'll be the first to admit that, and I understand that. So this is sort of like today akin to being on a road and wanting to get from here to there, but having like a pasture in the middle or something. So it dead ends here, and you just want to build a little road to connect it over here. The FAA is probably screaming if they're listening to this going, it's not that way it works, but it's a concept. It's a suggestion for something that might work. It's aspirational. It would require a great deal of work and effort, but it's possible that it could be done. Or something like this. It doesn't have to be this particular arrival. Now, GBAS, this is tricky for a lot of reasons, because it connects to the FAA airspace and because it's a little bit further out than most of the other ones. And so GBAS probably could only accommodate down to maybe about here or so. It can accommodate, I think, about 23 nautical miles from the hardware at the airport. So this may have to wait for a future expanded GBAS mileage route area, increase in area size. It may have to, I don't know what else, but I don't know what the future holds, but I think that this is a concept of being able to provide some relief to people in other areas that are inundated by the surfer at night. And we're all, I know, focused on nighttime noise. So existing LA to Oakland route, a gap in the road, if you will, where the black is, and then a connection to something like this, which blue line, which would probably be much better designed as a GBAS line, but the concept is there. And this could be done only at night for many reasons, and would be something that we haven't looked at before. Let's leave it there, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is a I mean, this definitely very ambitious, and if it is feasible, that will definitely, you know, without raising any false expectation, will bring a lot of relief to different communities which are even farther than the immediate area of SFO, you know, like other places. And this, I would love to end up to hear what would the feedback on this would be. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting one, but I appreciate that you are really pushing outside the box and trying, even though it might not be it is complicated, it might be very complicated, but at least you are making us all think and try to figure out ways outside the box. So I appreciate that. Okay, I see Member O'Connell.
Thank you so much, Chair. You know, out of all of these, the first 4 suggestions seemed sorry. Small asks. And this last one is very ambitious, but would have the most effect on the Lower Peninsula cities. Sorry, my soda went down the wrong way. And I think that'd be great to be able to submit it and see where it went.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else would like to have a comment? I don't see any. Kathleen, please go ahead, proceed.
The last one is probably the most ambitious of all. And this one is with the West Flow. And this is the concept of being able, during certain conditions, perhaps, I think as Ms. O'Connell mentioned, during visual conditions, creating 2 pathways, 2-8 left and 2-8 right, both of which curve out into the bay. And this concept, this map, this drawing right here, was submitted by the Roundtable back in 2016 as part of the NorCal initiative recommendations. And needless to say, the FAA said it wasn't feasible because it didn't meet the required separation standards. So without going into all of that, the concept is to have 2 flight paths that stay away from the Bayside cities, so that and they can do pretty much what we're doing now. Right now, what we are doing at the airport is we have a 2-8 left path that goes something like this, and that goes, you know, very close to Redwood Shores, very close to, well, over Foster City, and very close to East San Mateo. And then we have a path, let's say, that goes maybe from here, oops, here and here, and goes something. There's many different paths to the right, but one of them is offset, and one of them goes right over Foster City and the Bayside cities. So the concept would be, I don't know exactly, it's a tough concept to get to, but would be to allow this blue line, let's say, to continue for 2-8 right, and to draw a new line, which would, oops, sorry, that may go, we'll just use the green one, to 2-8 left. So this gives us some spacing here, and of course, a great deal more spacing there. But the idea is 2 paths that can curve just enough to clear the cities, but also to have a little separation here. This is very aspirational. It's been talked about for decades. And I think it's time for us to see if the technology is there that can support it. One of the advantages of the GBAS program is similar to, this is this is not a GBAS, this is a departure procedure at Orange County Airport. But I brought this up only because it has these wonderful jiggy-jaggy, these are flight paths. And I'm thinking that if they are able to do that today without GBAS, you know, maybe we'll be able to do something like this. It is aspirational. It is a long shot, but I think with technology, we have an opportunity to take a look and see if we can make it happen. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Kathleen. I remember this. We called it at the time dual offset during the select committee roundtable, and the FAA did send it back as unfeasible due to the technology. So in my view, this is like technology based and technology dependent if it is to be applied. And I remember when SFO came over to our city council presenting GBAS, that was a question I asked. So hopefully GBAS will have a technology to do a dual offset, because that is really will be as far as I'm concerned, a game changer to those Bay communities if they are able to implement the technology, if the technology allows. Hopefully that is something that could be feasible with the technology allowing that ambitious and that scenario that will put a lot of relief to communities on the Bay. I just want to make a comment before I take comments or question on this last procedure that you had proposed. If I remember correctly in your comments, this is you basically focusing mostly on nighttime enhancement, right? Not the suggestion mostly for nighttime, or are you suggesting anytime possible, but more importantly, nighttime?
Yes, and for the, if you mean for this very last one, for the dual approaches, I would anticipate this being a 24/7 procedure, dual offset approaches, but possibly only under certain weather conditions, so that we'd be able, so that if there's an airplane here, an airplane here, it may need to be like it is for some of our approaches nowadays, where you have to see the airplane ahead of you or something. I have no idea what kind of constraints would be required, but it's a suggestion to give to GBAS and see what they can run with it or not.
Understood. No, I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. And it's always, that is the case, whether we're discussing this or anything else, everything that we talk about or we propose or we hear, it's always weather permitting. That is always will trump any things that we would like to see, or even any existing procedure. So that basically goes back to safety.
Okay, I'm sorry to be running late, so I'm happy to take questions.
That's okay. So I'm basically, for those who are with us, probably we're gonna go over about 5 minutes. Please bear with us. I don't see any questions from members of the roundtable. Let me open it up to members of the public, and we'll come back to the roundtable membership. Ms. Montes.
Thank you, Chairman. I do see a couple hands raised, so I will first call on Darlene Yapley, followed by Remy Tan. Ms. Yapley?
Can the roundtable and SFO provide a minimum level of data and transparency by summarizing the proposals in an executive level chart? For example, which cities are affected, the estimated level of effort involved, the estimated level of benefit, and potential constraints, attributes, for example, part-time, nighttime, etc. I think this is necessary to have criteria to support decision-making. And there's a limited number of approaches that can be done, and prioritizing is important. This is also necessary because many times cities don't know whether they are affected. If you ask a city, raise your hand if that procedure affects you, they don't really know. And although the arrivals of bodega, surfer, pirate are mentioned, this does not mean the cities that are overflown by these procedures that would benefit, but it's suggesting something else based on how they're defined. And this is what causes some of the confusion. Number two, a major goal for SFO was to have notable noise reduction. Therefore, we need to sprinkle in some more innovative approaches that can be used often and that reduce noise substantially over mid-peninsula cities seems to be needed more. SFO must engage directly with cities impacted by GBAS that are not on the roundtable. A 2-minute public comment, as you have seen just from the job that Kathleen did, it requires a lot more dialogue and exploration to have a discussion. A 2-minute public comment is not effective, and I just really hope that we can get more of a direct dialogue. Imagine if you only had 2 minutes to comment with Kathleen, or Kathleen only had 2 minutes to present all of this to SFO. So that's the point that I want to make. Again, can you provide transparency and data to help decision-making? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Shapley. I will now call on Mr. Tan, followed by Mary Jo Fremont. Mr. Tan?
Hi, I'm Ramey Tan, North Pacifica. I agree with, I think, what was said about seeing we can get the bodega flight path. It really should come over the ocean and then merge with the pirate flight path, and to minimize the flyovers over the entire, from Daly City all the way down to Palo Alto, across the entire peninsula. So that would be great that that can happen, as well as the the alternate surfer one that was in the presentation. But I think to make any of these a reality, we should have somebody from the FAA, as part of the roundtable, to say, oh, this is possible and not possible, and then work as a working group, so that we have ideas that when it finally presented to the FAA for approval, that they are approvable. So that would be a suggestion on that, because we don't know anything about like how the Oakland airport approaches and the San Jose airport approaches could affect any of these approaches. I especially like the one that hangs out over the bay and comes out through the gate, but I wonder if for the shoreline departure that interferes with that outbound approach going west. So again, that's something I think the FAA could expert could answer better. Thank you.
Angela, before you move on to the next speaker, let me just respond a little bit to Mr. Tan. And as a point of clarification, all these suggestions are not really going to the FAA. They are going to the SFO GBAS team, and then they need to evaluate it and they'll take it to the next level if that is feasible. Go ahead, Angela.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now call on Mary Jo Fremont, and that is our last hand raised for this item. Ms. Fremont?
Thank you, Mary Jo Fremont. I have one question and one comment. My question is about where the GBAS approaches can start. The proposals shown today imply that the GBAS approach can start miles away from the end of an arrival procedure. Is that correct? Or do the GBAS approaches can have to start really at the end of the star arrival? They have to start right there. This is really critical to know. My comment is now about doing several GBAS approaches with 28 right offset. 28 right offset is not going to reduce noise much for mid-peninsula cities for two reasons. The first one is the 28 right offset will not lengthen the flying distance by much. Therefore, the altitude over the mid-peninsula cities will not increase much. And the noisy speed brake deployment may still occur over these cities. So therefore, noise reduction would be minimal and unlikely to be perceived by residents. The second reason, as Kathleen Wentworth said, most of the SFO arrivals that fly over the peninsula typically land on 28 left, not 28 right. And these are the Surfer, Pirate, Bodega West arrival. And they fly over mid-peninsula cities, including Menlo Park and East Palo Alto. Therefore, doing GBAS 28 right offsets does not improve things for these cities. And as Darlene said, one GBAS system can only support a finite number of approaches. So if you want to reduce noise over mid-peninsula cities, we need approaches that are used often for arrivals on 28 left and that reduce noise a lot, which means you need to increase altitude substantially, but not just a few hundred feet. You need to delay the deployment of speed brakes over the residential areas. And you need to also create new arrival path to reduce the concentrations over some areas. So if you had GBAS approaches that use a 23 nautical mile radius and they were curved, then you could do that. You could reduce noise, especially if you created different approaches that would still respect historical ground tracks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fremont. And with that, Chairman Hindi, we do not have any virtual hands raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montes. Let me bring it back very quickly to the roundtable. Basically, the question before us today is, do we want to recommend any or all of these suggestions to the SFO roundtable membership at the general meeting in December 7th? Member Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, again, these seem like really simple solutions, and I hopefully that the technology does allow us to do these in a reasonable and regular fashion, because I think some of the comments made the point of, we can't do it just for one-offs. This should be for the procedures that are used all the time so that we can really impact noise. Now, if the new technology allows for some of these suggestions that we're giving the SFO, man, I think that'd be great, because then we will really move the needle. So I'm all for it. I think that these are great, and I appreciate all the hard work for Kathleen. And listen, if they come back and say no, they're not feasible, at least we asked. So I'm 100% for it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment. The member O'Connell. Terry, you're muted.
I want to echo Member Ortiz. I think all of these have the ability to lower some noise. To what degree will yet to be seen, but I don't think anything would increase noise to any member communities. And that, to me, having Kathleen's insight to what goes on in an airplane and what might be possible is invaluable to this committee. And I really respect the work she's put into it. And I think that while it may not address everything that some of our southern cities experience on arrival noise, this is a very good start, and it has some really good potential. So yes, I would recommend moving this forward to the entire committee roundtable.
Thank you, Member O'Connell. Thank you for your recommendation and for your comments. I echo my colleague very simply, and let me, Kathleen, really express my thanks to you for doing that. And I'm really glad to see that you did not just concentrate on membership cities. You kind of looked outside and you tried to address where you believe might be a potential of improvement, regardless of who is on the roundtable and who is not. With the caveat and the disclaimer that we always get, we are not speaking on behalf of any of those communities. I truly understand that, but also, again, I want to applaud you for it, looking at what might be possible, regardless of where in the geography those improvement might be. Okay, so you got direction, I guess, Kathleen, you got unanimous direction from all of us on the subcommittee to go ahead and bring it over to the December 7 meeting. Okay, with that, I'm moving on. Before we adjourn, ask any members of the roundtable if they have anything again on the future agenda, a future meeting agenda. Okay, seeing none. I have item number 5, SFO aircraft noise office update. Bert, very quickly, if you can be brief, because we are going over time, I would appreciate it.
Definitely will, sir. So the roundtable did ask that we not just report on the NIITE HUSSH as we had been with the report. They wanted more focus on what we're doing to remedy the issue. I'll go ahead and share with you a spreadsheet that we're using right now to track what we're doing. We'll be using this in a more formal report, but you can see the date, the occurrence of the stick or the candle departure occurred, and the flight that was doing it, what reason we received, or where it's lying in the investigative process. But we are getting answers, and we're getting through to the airlines, and we're making definite headway.
Right. Thanks. Is that something eventually you're going to be sharing with on the December 7th, or this is for the next technical? Give us another update.
Well, we probably could share it with the December 7th meeting. It's just, like I said, right now it's a very simple form. And
Yeah.
we'll just get a little bit more detail on it as a tag sheet for the conventional report that we've been using.
Okay. So it'll be like kind of brief little update similar to this one.
So sometimes simple is better. And I think this really shows what you're doing and where you're at with an investigation. So if this is what you give to the roundtable, I think that's great, because it shows you're doing something, and keep it simple.
We always are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being brief and concise. I appreciate that. Okay, let me move on to members of the public on comments for item number 5.
Thank you, Chairman. I do not have any virtual hands raised for item number 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montes. And then one more time, if any members have any items or any issues to discuss at a future meeting, please let me know. Seeing none, with that, I'm going to go ahead and thank everybody for joining us, and my apologies for running over time. With that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.